Hi, so some of you guys today are at home when you're normally at school. And for those of you, maybe this is just a review so that you get to see how to do this project again, okay? So I'm going to go through some printmaking techniques and kind of teach you how to do a little scavenger hunt around your house where you can find some things to print, things to stamp around your house. So let's see what I have in front of me. All right, so I just went around my house and I gathered some things to try to print. And I tried to pick some things that you guys probably also have at your house. So first thing we want to do is we want to start with a regular marker. It cannot be a Sharpie marker because a Sharpie marker will just stick to whatever we're trying to print. Okay, so we're going to take this marker and all of a sudden, just by taking the cap off, I have something that I can make a stamp out of. So I'm going to take this marker and color on to the circular part of this marker cap right here. And then I'll stamp it down on the paper. And you'll see that it'll leave the marker that I started with from here onto the paper. So essentially I made a stamp out of just the marker cap. And because we're doing a little scavenger hunt and kind of trying to keep track of what we're finding, I'd like for you to label it. So I'm just going to write marker cap. Okay. And this doesn't have to be super tidy. This is not going to turn into an artwork. This is just a place to collect your ideas. It's just an inquiry. So we're really just thinking about what can we find around your house that you could turn into a stamp. Okay, so marker cap, that one seems to work. It's not perfect. It's not the same as if I were to actually draw a circle, but that's okay. What I don't want you to do is feel like you have to go in and fix that. I would prefer you to leave it a stamp, because if you go in and draw on top, that's a drawing and not a print, okay? So don't draw it even if it doesn't completely work, all right? So I also wanted to grab a few other things here. I grabbed a glue stick. This might be something that you have at your house. And there are a couple of surfaces on here that could be really cool to try to print. So first thing I'm going to start with is the top of the glue stick. And you can see I'm using the angled part of my marker when I'm coloring on the top of this glue stick. And I color all over it a few times. And then I can turn that over, press it down, get a pretty good press on there, and then pick it up. And you can see that it left the center open, but the outside edge there is the way that it should be. Okay, and then I can write on that one glue stick cap or glue cap. Okay. There are also some other cool places on this glue that I really want to try. So I'm going to take the lid off of it and set the actual glue stick aside. And then there's these really nice ridges on here. And so I want to try to color these. Now this is going to be one that in order to get it to stamp, I'm probably going to have to roll it or move it in some way to make it go. And I do have to work quite quickly because otherwise my marker will dry on the surface of whatever I'm trying to print. So I'm just going to do a little bit and then I'll roll that on there. And yeah, that made a really nice stamp with lots of tiny little lines in there. So that's a cool texture. It's also got a really solid line on the edge there, and that's just the base of that glue stick cap, okay? So that one is one that works as well. So I can label that glue cap, but I might put a little note that says side. So all of these notes are just for me to be able to go back in and look at these things so that when we want to make art with this kind of stamp again, or with this texture, we'll remember what made that texture, okay? So other things you might have around your house, this might be one, and this is kind of an interesting one, and also kind of like the glue cap, one that you have to move in order to make it work. So I'm going to color all over this fork. Now, if your family, the adults in your house, say, do not color on that, don't color on it. Do not get me in trouble, okay? But we are doing a little scavenger hunt and just a little bit of an inquiry to see if we can figure out what works and what doesn't. So I do want you to explore different things that you might think are a little bit strange to print. How cool is that? Okay, so if I were, like, let's say for an artwork, I wanted to make some sort of grasses or some sort of, I don't know, anything that would make those lines, maybe like a rib cage even could be really cool. I could print that a couple of different times, and you can see it begins to create quite the surface there. I wonder, I'm also curious what might happen if I overlap that same shape, but I just put it, instead of putting it next to the others, I could set it down right on top, and maybe I end up with something different there. Yeah, so now I've got some nice layers going on in there with a really thick line across the bottom. So remember, it has to be a regular marker. A Sharpie won't work. If you color on a fork with a Sharpie, the Sharpie's gonna stay on the marker or on the fork forever. So let's not do that, okay? Also, a Sharpie will not transfer onto the paper from another surface. So it has to be just a regular marker. All right, so, oh, and then label it, fork. So I've done 1, 2, 3, 4 of them there. I really want to show you an eraser because that's a really good one that transfers really well. So this is just a regular pink eraser. And if I take my marker and I color on the edge of that there, you'll notice that it receives the marker ink really well. It almost soaks in, but not really. And then when I flip that around and press that onto my paper, you can see that exact same shape but in reverse is there on the paper. So then I want to label that one eraser. All right, so I also want to show you how to make your own stamp. And if you make these stamps of your own, when you're finished with them, I want you to tuck them in your backpack so you can remember to bring them to art class next week, okay? They're nice and small, so they'll probably just slide into the bottom of your backpack, and I'll remind you to grab it next time, okay? So this is just a regular piece of cardboard from a box that came in the mail, and the thing is, what I'm noticing about all of these things that worked here is that they have a really smooth surface, and so it's not rough. Like this cardboard is rough, the paper is pretty rough, but something that's plastic, something that's rubber, those kinds of things have a really smooth surface that will help us transfer the marker from that surface onto the paper when we flip it over, okay? So if I'm gonna make my own stamp, what I have is a piece of cardboard, but like, let's say I draw a little tree on here, like that, and then I take that tree and I flip it over. It is not going to transfer. There is no tree that showed up there. So just drawing on the cardboard is not going to work. Now, I did go through my recycling and I found some printer ink box and some Kleenex boxes, or cereal boxes would probably also do the same thing. So you can see when I'm moving this around that there's a little bit of shine to this box, and I think that's what's going to make it work. So I also have a pair of scissors here, and I'm just going to cut out a little section so that it's a little bit more manageable. I don't have to deal with all the tabs or the folded edges or the torn edges. I'm just going to make it almost into a tiny little piece of paper, okay? And it has a shiny side and it has a rough side. And I'll show you in a little bit how we can make a piece of cardboard into a shiny piece of cardboard if you cannot find some cardboard that's shiny, okay? So I cut off all of the folds, I cut off all of the little torn bits and edges. And now, on this one, I'm going to draw a different tree. Nice and simple, nice and small. And I'm going to cut that tree out. So I should probably draw that bottom line there. That'll be fine. So I'm going to take my time when I'm cutting this because anything that you leave attached is going to show up as part of your stamp. So I'm just cutting around my drawing there. If I don't get it perfectly, that's okay. But like I said, everything we cut is what's going to show up, not the drawing. Okay, so I've got my little tree there. And I'll push my scraps aside. And you can see when you flip it over what the shape might be like. Alright, kind of looks like a little broccoli piece, but that's also okay. So then I can take that glue stick that I was playing with earlier, and on the rough side, I'm going to put a little glue. On the rough side, I put the glue. On the rough side, you put the glue. That way, when you flip it over and glue it down to your thicker cardboard, your smooth side is facing up. So let's see if we can make this work and if it will turn into a stamp. If it doesn't, remember, like I said, this is just an inquiry, and I have another thought on how to make it work. So let's try. So now I have a smooth piece of cardboard on top of the rough one. And let's stick with black. So I'm going to color all over that tree that I just cut out from the shiny cardboard, the smooth cardboard. And like I said, we have to work quite quickly because we don't want the marker to dry on the surface of our stamp. And then quickly flip it over, set it down. I can rub all over there where that tree is, pick it up, and this time we've made the transfer. This time it worked. So then, knowing all of those different ways to make stamps, we can create any kind of artwork we want because we can think about all the different shapes and textures that we could find that make stamps. We could try little erasers that are funny shaped like this whale, and it comes in pieces, so I could use that individual shape first, and then I could use maybe I could use the top part next because the bottom of that is a really interesting shape. And then this part here has some ridges on it. You can't really see it on the video, but that could make an interesting texture. So really anything that I wanted to create, I could do because I am able to search and find lots of different materials to turn into a stamp, including, like I did with the tree, making your own, okay? So then I could print this, I could stamp it probably 20 times and across a page come up with a forest and make an actual artwork out of it. Now this week though, I'm not expecting you to actually make an artwork out of your stamp. I just want you to go around your house and find some things you can make into stamps. So you might find a fork, or you might use the cap of your marker. You might also find a fun-shaped eraser or even a regular eraser. Your thumb is a great way to make a stamp. There are lots of ways we can do this, okay? If you don't have shiny cardboard, I just want to give you this tip before I set you free to go and find these things, okay? If you don't have shiny cardboard, the answer is tape. So if you can find some Scotch tape, or if you can find packing tape, masking tape also works really well. It's got kind of like a texture like skin. That's a pretty cool one. So all sorts of different, this is a washi tape. I bet that would also work. Anything that you can find to make the surface of your cardboard shiny, it will work. And then when you color on it, just like I colored on this tree that I made, it will transfer from the tree onto the paper. But it won't do it on the rough cardboard. It won't transfer. Okay? All right, so those are my tips. I want you to try it. Remember, like I did here, and like the example that's in your Canvas page, make sure you label it so that you can remember what those shapes were for next week. And for those of you in person, make sure if you make a stamp, bring it back so that we can play with it in class next week. All right, have fun with these projects, and I'll see you next time.